The sun was setting, and a cold desert wind pushed hard against the shepherd's body as he appeared on the small hill near his home. He leaned forward to gain stability in the gusting air. His staff slid through his calloused, sun-hardened fingers. Sand scraped inside the cloth wrapping his head, past his cheeks, bouncing off his ears and tumbling down in his shoulders. He kept his head down to shield his eyes. He watched with every step, his feet vanish and reappear underneath his ankle-length garment. His feet were still tingling from the moment, from the ground. His mind was overwhelmed with the events of the day, which only made him study his feet. They were white and diseased, his whole body was, for a moment, but then no longer. It was a baffling ordeal. His wife waved from the entrance of a series of large tents. She stood watching him, her hands on her hips, her hair tossed sideways by the unrelenting desert wind. How was he going to explain what happened? She would never believe him. He barely believed it. He was there. Then there was that snake and that ground. His wife was so loving and so positive, but he imagined this was beyond her patience, beyond her support. Essentially, he would be telling her of his death, or so he feared. How would she respond? How would she worry? How could that even be possible? How could any of it be possible? The shepherd's thoughts raced and his heart ached, anticipating the look in her eyes, the reaction of his two sons. He would be going directly into danger, and he would need her support, more than he knew. Your brother's here, his wife announced, drawing back the tent entrance. Thank you, dear, I know. The shepherd entered the tent to see his brother and his wife's father sitting near the back of the second tent. He kept his head down, allowing his eyes to adjust to the darkened room as he removed his outer coverings and shook the sand from his clothes. He carefully placed his staff against the support post, staring at it for a moment. Why'd you bring your staff inside? His wife asked. From today forward, we will keep it inside, the shepherd explained. Then he sat on the small stool near the tent entrance to wipe clean the sand from his feet. His mind fell into the memories of the afternoon, bewildered, amazed. His feet were so smooth now. That ground. It must have been that ground, the shepherd thought to himself. The calloused, rough underside of his feet were now soft and sensitive, like the feet of a small child raised in a palace. Jethro, his wife's father, was reclining against a large pile of blankets and pillows, stoking a small fire at his feet with a long stick. The frail old man carried the conversation, yet his lips barely moved. Underneath the darkened skin of his wrinkled throat, his bulging Adam's apple bounced with every word. Across the room sat the shepherd's brother, having recently arrived from the great city of the wolves. He looked over his shoulder at his younger brother entering the tent. He was instructed to make the journey out to this desert land by the same cause, yet unknown to either he or his brother. It had been many months since his last visit. The shepherd ducked his head under the tent supports as he made his way across the first tent. He was still lost for words. His heart leaped in his chest at the thought of retelling the events of the day. His mind burst with possibilities, things too great to explain with his feeble words. He was never good with his words. He knew of this day from his forefathers, yet never knew he would be part of its coming. Why is my brother here? Does he know as well? This couldn't be a coincidence, he thought as he paced before them. Maybe he had an experience like mine. If not, will they think I've lost my mind? This ground moves under my feet like it should, but not as earlier. He stood at an angle behind his seated brother and reclined father-in-law, trading curious looks between them. His indecisive grin was too much for Jethro. What is this? Your brother's traveled 3 days to see you. Aren't you going to speak to him? The shepherd shook his head, trying to focus on the present. His mind was surging with a mixture of joy and wonder. Forgive me, my day was unlike any other I've ever had, the shepherd replied. He sat on the ground between the two men, crossing his legs and staring at his feet. Your eyes told me something strange. What happened out there today? His wife asked as she stepped up behind him. She bent down and handed him a clay cup with water. The shepherd took a small drink and closed his eyes as he swallowed the refreshing liquid. His brother looked up at his wife with concern. The room was silent, except for the sound of the limbs crackling in the fire. 4 nights ago, I had a strange experience. I had to come see you. What is going on? His brother asked, placing his hand on the shepherd's shoulder. The shepherd motioned to his wife. Come sit down next to me, dear. I need to share something with all of you. He reached up to take hold of his wife's hand and helped her sit down next to him. Aaron, I knew you were coming to visit me today. Before I returned here, I knew. Something happened to me today. Something beautiful. I am. He was. The shepherd laughed. The voice was so beautiful. So very beautiful. Whom did you speak with today? His wife asked quickly. Fire, he blurted, followed by a strange chuckle. Well, someone specifically full of fire, radiating, shining. He didn't give his name, but only the name in which he spoke. The ground was alive. I could feel it, Zipporah. It was alive. I... The shepherd lost his words as tears streamed from his eyes. How could anyone choose me? I'm not worthy. I am not innocent. He looked down, overcome with emotion. Jethro smiled, casting glances to Aaron and his daughter. His wife placed her arm around his waist and her left hand on his leg. Take your time, my love. Brother, yes, take a minute. Gather your words and tell us what happened, Aaron said patiently. The shepherd wiped his eyes and looked up at the new skin on the bottom of his feet. Glowing in the light of the small fire, his eyes then watched the fire, its heat consuming the contents, throwing ashes to the side. How could fire burn like that? It is too wonderful. Nothing was consumed, but yet the daylight was ashamed, the shepherd said softly. Zipporah, my love, where are the boys? They're still tending to their herds, she answered. Tell me, what is this about? Aaron, we will be leaving with you to go back to the city. I need to speak with the elders of our people, the shepherd said. Moses, if they find you, they will kill you. You can't return to Egypt, Zipporah said, her voice cracking with fear. I must. We must. I met him today. Who, Moses? Who put this idea in your head? Whom did you speak with? Aaron said excitedly. The God of our fathers, brother. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God that heals the disease, the God that hears the cry of the oppressed, the God of promise, the God that redeems the ground, that sets fire within a thing yet does not destroy it. He has set a fire within me. The God that knows my name. He knew me. He called me, Moses revealed, his voice erupting with passion. He continued staring into the fire, his eyes glistening with tears. Brother, are you talking about? Aaron started. I am, Moses interrupted. I am that I am, the being above all, the creator of heaven and earth, told me today to go to my people and have Pharaoh release them. As he has remade my feet, he has remade my heart, even my purpose. How will the elders believe you? How do you believe Pharaoh will grant you this audacious request? Aaron questioned. Moses chuckled and looked up at his brother with a wild smile. Hand me my staff. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you. My wife's running in here telling me I was muted. Hopefully everyone's having a great Sabbath this morning. I really appreciate you guys all showing up. We're having some audio issues, apparently, so I was trying to figure that out, but that video clip that I had pre-made was too big to upload into my studio, so I had to do it kind of like a alternative way, and it's always tricky with the audio. But I'm actually going to pre-upload that. I'm going to upload that later just as a separate video if you guys want to watch it again. It's just a little short story that I wrote a couple years ago about the moment that Moses would come back from the day that he was out and the burning bush experience happened to him, and what possibly would he communicate to his family about this huge undertaking he was about to go do, that the Father commissioned him to go do. So hopefully that'll bless you if you can hear all of it later. But thank you for joining me. Thank you for being here. We've got a fun Torah portion this morning. We're going to be reviewing the first 5 chapters of Exodus plus the first verse of chapter 6. And the reason that they do that is because the original Hebrew didn't have chapters and verses. It was just, all written out as one. So I think the reason why they chopped up the Torah portion by including the first 5 chapters plus the first verse of the 6th chapter is because that is the context. Like, that seems to finish a complete thought in the story's narrative. So thanks for joining me. We got already quite a few people here already in the chat. Gerald is here. The Blood Saves, Blue Dove, Psalm 119, D Love, Wind Feather, Wendy Russell, Maxim Lavrov, Clifford, Oh Please, Oh with many H's, Oh Please, David Shearer, Yaya Q, Vicky Lott, welcome everyone. Samantha B, West Plays Music, Michael Strickler, welcome everyone. Jim Newport, Carrie Arez, Chewbacca 2020, Welcome, 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 guys. Takata's Moonblade, welcome. And a lot more is here. Thanks, you guys, for being here. So how we're doing these Torah portions, a little different than what you may have seen other people that do these allotted segmented Torah portions. We're going to go through the main portions, which are the main chapters of Exodus that we're reviewing this week. I have companion passages after each chapter. While I read the companion passages during that time period, you're welcome to call in. I've dropped the call-in link in the chat. I'll drop it in there again real quick. And it's also in the video description down below in the video description. So you can use that if you have your hair fixed and a shirt on. You're welcome to call, and you can actually come on video with me if you'd like, and you can talk live about the chapter that we just read or about the companion passages to that chapter, whether you just have commentary or you have a question. But you're welcome to call in and discuss it if you'd like. Just remember that I'm going to try to keep it to around 10 minutes if I can, so that the discussion doesn't drag out to like 30 or 40 minutes, and then the Torah portion doesn't end up being like 3 hours. Okay. So it'll still be kind of structured, but you're welcome to call in if you have something you'd like to say real quick about it, or if you have a question that you had about that chapter, you're welcome to call in. So, all right, guys, we have a good bit to cover. Let's just get going. We'll start with this real quick. Let me get my display working for me. Okay, so we're going to be looking at Exodus chapter 1 in this first portion. So here it says, "These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. They came each one with his household, and Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. All the people who descended from Jacob were 70 people, but Joseph was already in Egypt. And Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation. But the sons of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly, and multiplied and became exceedingly mighty, so that the land was filled with them. Now a new king arose over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, 'Behold, the people of the sons of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them. Otherwise they will multiply, and in the event of war, they will also join those who hate us and fight against us and depart from the land.' So they appointed taskmasters over them to oppress them with hard labor. And they built for Pharaoh strong cities of Pithom and Ramses. But the more they oppressed them, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread out. So they dreaded the sons of Israel. The Egyptians used violence to compel the sons of Israel to labor, and they made their lives bitter with hard labor in mortar and in bricks and all kinds of labor in the field, all their labors which they violently had them perform as slaves. Then the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah, and the other was named Puah. And he said, 'When you are helping the Hebrew women to give birth and see them upon the birth stool, if it is a son, then you shall put him to death. But if it is a daughter, then he shall live.' But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt had commanded them, but let the boys live. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said to them, 'Why have you done this thing, and let the boys live?' The midwives said back to Pharaoh, 'Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife can get to them.' So God was good to the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very mighty. And because the midwives feared God, he established households for them. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, 'Every son who is born you are to throw into the Nile, but every daughter you are to keep alive.'" Okay, that's pretty wild. Pretty wild, guys. So we've got this new Pharaoh that has arisen. The previous Pharaoh had already started oppressing. This is what we read from last week at the tail end of the book of Genesis. We have this issue with the Pharaoh that basically was actually a king of Canaan, who also ruled over all of Babylon, the kingdom that Babylon had ruled on. They came and attacked Egypt over time, and so then through the course of time, he turned the Egyptian people against the Hebrews, and this is where we're seeing how that escalated now to the point of literally forcing them into slave labor instead of just disdaining them, because it was a slow progression that happened over an entire kingship. Now the new king take over. He's continuing this attitude of division, creating division between the Egyptians and the Hebrews to the point where now they're actually enslaving them for fear of the disunity that was already caused. This is the kind of the hilarious part about this, is because, if you read Jubilees 46, like the Hebrews were fine. The Egyptians and the Hebrews, they were at peace. They were living peacefully in the land together until the Babylonian king came in and created and sowed division. And when that division started to fully grow, then it got to a point of paranoia where the Babylonian king's like, well, they're going to join with the people that hate us. Why? Because you've just been hating on them for 80 years. So it's this weird self-defeating, self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will, if I could loosely use that term, whereas it's a social engineering from the Babylonian king over the Egyptian people towards to foster hatred toward the Hebrews, which then turned into an obvious problem amongst the relations between the Hebrews in Goshen and the rest of the Egyptian people, to the point where now he's worried about actually having an enemy living within his own borders, because that's literally the fruit that he sowed. It's crazy. So to try to counter this, right, because he created the problem, now he's got a solution. This is the age-old dichotomy of, the two hands of the occult, right? They create the problem and they come up with a solution. So this is the solution was, now we're just going to enslave them. Now we're going to keep them, we're going to keep a tighter lockdown on their lives, or make life worse for them, because they might leave. It's crazy. It's crazy. But that's just the mind of the enemy. That's the way it works. All right, guys. Let me see here. Let's go to. We didn't have any companion passages for Exodus 1, but I think we've got some for the following. But and no one has called in, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump into chapter 2 real quick. It says, "Now a man from the house of Levi went and married a daughter of Levi, and the woman conceived and gave birth to a son. And when she saw that he was beautiful, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she got him in a papyrus basket and covered it with tar and pitch. Then she put the child in it and set it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. And his sister stood at a distance to find out what would happen to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the Nile, and with her female attendants walking alongside the Nile, she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her slave woman, and she brought it to her. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the boy was crying. And she had pity on him and said, 'This is one of the Hebrews' children.' Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, 'Shall I go and call a woman for you who is nursing from the Hebrew women, so that she may nurse the child for you?' Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Go ahead.' So the girl went and called the child's mother. And then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages.' So the woman took the child and nursed him. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, and said, 'Because I drew him out of water.' Now it came about in those days." Real quick, guys, I just want to make a quick note. We're actually going to cover this in our companion passage when we look at Jubilees 47. But you guys notice here in verse 14, actually, hang on. I think it's here in verse 10. If you notice here at the very beginning of verse 10, it says, "And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter." A lot of people skip over that. It makes you think, because people skip past that real quick. They don't really take a moment and think about what that actually said right there. This is where we get the misconception that Pharaoh grew up his whole life in the court of Pharaoh. Excuse me. People get the misconception that Moses grew up his whole life with Pharaoh's daughter as his mother, but that's not the case. He actually grew up until he was about 21 years old with his actual parents. And then he was brought into the custody, if you will, to be trained in all the learning of Egypt under Pharaoh's daughter. So this, and I'm going to go over those passages here in just a minute. A lot of people don't realize this. So this is why he's going to have an affinity for his brethren, the Hebrews, later in the story. He literally grew up amongst them. They knew who he was. So here in verse 11 through 14, it says, "Now it came about in those days, when Moses had grown up, that he went out to his fellow Hebrews and looked at their hard labors. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his fellow Hebrews. So he looked this way and that, and when he saw that there was no one around, he struck and killed the Egyptian, and hid his body in the sand. Now when he went out the next day, and behold, 2 Hebrews were fighting with each other, and he said to the offender, 'Why are you striking your companion?' But the guy said, 'Who made you a ruler and a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?' Then Moses was afraid and said, "Surely the matter has become known." Pharaoh heard about this matter. He tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the presence of Pharaoh and settled in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. And then the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. When they came to their father Reuel, he said, "Why have you come back so soon today?" And they said, "An Egyptian saved us from the shepherds, and what is more, he even drew water for us and watered the flock." So he said to his daughters, "Where is he? Where is he then? Why is it that you have left the man behind? Invite him to have something to eat." And Moses was willing to live with the man, and he gave his daughter Zipporah, to Moses. Then he gave birth to a son, and he named him Gershom, for he said, "I've been a stranger in a foreign land." Now it came about in the course of many of those days that the king of Egypt died, and the sons of Israel groaned because of the bondage, and they cried out, and their cry for help because of their bondage ascended to God. So God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he said to his daughters, "Where is..." Oh, sorry, guys. There's a duplicate. All right, so we're going to go into our companion passage real quick. This is in Jubilees chapter 47. We're going to take a look at some of the same information, but it has extra details that kind of give us a better, well-rounded picture. So Jubilees 47, 1 through 5, it says, "The 7th week in the 7th year, in the 47th Jubilee, your father went forth from the land of Canaan, and you were born in the 4th week." This is the book of Jubilees, where the angel is actually explaining to Moses extra events, and he actually talks about his birth and his life and his father and different things. In the 6th year thereof, in the 40th Jubilee, this was the time of tribulation on the children of Israel. And Pharaoh, king of Egypt, issued a command regarding them that they should cast all their male children which were born into the river. And they cast them in for 7 months until the day that you were born. And your mother hid you for 3 months. And they told regarding her, and she made an ark for you, and covered it with pitch and asphalt, and placed it in the flags on the bank of the river. And she placed you in it 7 days, and you came by night and suckled you, and and your mother came by night and suckled you, and by day Miriam your sister guarded you from the birds. And in those days, Darmut, the daughter of Pharaoh, she came to bathe in the river, and she heard the voice of your voice crying. And she told her maidens to bring you forth, and they brought you unto her. And she took you out of the ark, and she had compassion on you. And your sister said unto her, "Shall I go and call unto you one of the Hebrew women to nurse and suckle this babe for you?" And she said unto her, "Go." And she went and came and called your mother Jochebed, and she gave her wages, and she nursed you. And afterwards, when you were grown up, they brought you unto the daughter of Pharaoh, and you did become her son. And Amram, your father, taught you writing. And after you have completed 3 weeks, that they brought you into the royal court. And you were 3 weeks of years at court, until the time when you did go forth from the royal court and see an Egyptian smiting your friend, who was of the children of Israel. And you did slay him and hide him in the sand. Okay. So this, let's go back here to this verse real quick. So just to give you guys this is Jubilees 47. So basically, I wanted to point this out, but this is important for later because, Moses is of the Levites. They were the tribe whom descended from Levi, and this is before Mount Sinai happens, okay? So a lot of people are not aware that Levi, according to Jubilees chapter 32 and 33, he was given the priesthood to minister before the sons of Jacob. That was appointed to him, chosen to him for specific reasons. And he was very devout. So therefore, his descendants were promised to have the priesthood perpetually and forever. The covenant made. This is the covenant referenced in Malachi chapter 2, verses 4 through 7. This is the misconception a lot of people have. They think that the priesthood was given to the Levites only at Mount Sinai, and that's not true at all. It was just solidified in front of the entire congregation again that God did choose Aaron and his sons. But Malachi chapter 2 speaks specifically about the covenant that Yahweh made with Levi, the son of Jacob, whom Moses is a descendant of Levi. Okay, this is also mentioned in Hebrews chapter 7. So this is why Amram, a descendant of Levi, would teach Moses writings. This is a term you see in the book of Jubilees that speaks of someone being trained in the priesthood. This is where Jacob was also taught writings by Isaac and Abraham He was being trained in the priesthood. This is why it tells you later in Jubilees 32 that Jacob literally discharged his priestly garments and gave them to Levi. Okay, so this was a big deal for Moses to be taught writing. So he's not only is he growing up. This is why it says in verse 9 that he had completed 3 weeks. They brought him into the royal court. Now, in the book of Jubilees, it uses this time qualifier of weeks, which means 7 years. It's a week of years. So this is where he's 21 years old, approximately 20 to 21 years old. And this is where he then is brought to the Egyptian custody, if you will. He's brought into the royal court of the Egyptians. But he had already been trained in the priesthood, which means he knows the Torah. He knows the law of God. This is very important, guys. And this is synonymous throughout the entire book of Jubilees. When someone's taught writings, they're being trained in the priesthood. The same thing we see for Abraham, who's been taught writings from his father Terah, not Abraham, but if you go into Jubilees chapter 8, you'll see the lineage of Terah, whom was a priest of Babylon. He was teaching their sons writings, and this is why Abraham was in their right lineage as well of a priest. So the Father is always using men who know His law to raise them up to be his vessels, his messengers. This is what's literally repeated in Malachi chapter 2, verses 4 through 7. So if this is this transition moment, this hopefully gives you some different perspective to understand a little bit clearer what we just read from Exodus chapter 2, verse 9 or 10, where it says, and the child grew, and then they brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. So this is exactly what we're seeing. Jubilees gives you a little bit more detail to help you understand the backstory, since he was from the Levites. And then, of course, he goes out and smites the Egyptian for slaying one of the children of Israel, and that's where he then has to go on the run. So we're going to get to that real quick. And that was our short companion passage for chapter 2. Like I said, guys, after each main portion, if you are if you have a question, or if you want to call in, make sure you're welcome to do that after I finish each main chapter of Exodus. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going on to the next chapter so that we can keep on with the study. All right. So this is Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 through 5. Let me get some water. It says, now Moses was pasturing the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, I must turn aside and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Then he said, do not come near here. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. And then the Lord said, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their outcry because of their taskmasters, for I am aware of their sufferings. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians, to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. And now behold, the cry of the sons of Israel has come to me. Furthermore, I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians are oppressing them. And now come, I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, assuredly I will be with you, and this shall be the sign to you, that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain. Then Moses said to God, behold, I'm going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now they may say to me, what's his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, this is what you shall say to the sons of Israel. I am has sent you to you. God furthermore said to Moses, this is what you shall say to the sons of Israel. The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This is the name for all generations to use to call upon me. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I am indeed concerned about you and what has been done to you in Egypt. So I said, I will bring you out of the oppression of Egypt to the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amazite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, to a land flowing with milk and honey. So, guys, I just wanted to make a quick distinction here. This is a famous passage. A lot of people like to just torture to death. They do a term that some theologians call script torture. Instead of scripture, they call it script torture, because they basically just take a lot of eisegesis and they just start taking these passages from Exodus chapter 3 and just start to mangle them to try to make it say certain things. And people will try to pull out of here and they'll try to say, well, see, Yahweh wasn't his name, and the tetragrammaton is evil, and that's not his name. His name is I am who I am. And then other people will say, well, no, you didn't. You read it. He says, this is the name that you're to use for all generations. I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's his name. And you're like, wait a minute, what? So the actual, if you look on screen here, the Masoretic, it actually says, I am who I am. I am has sent me to you. But the Septuagint just calls him the being. Excuse me, guys. I got some high altitude dryness going on. So there's a huge difference between I am who I am and the being. Ultimately, it's my understanding of what the actual word name means. This is why Moses is asking about, who should I tell him to send? Yes, there's an actual name that he's asking for, but with a name comes authority. And this is actually what the word Hashem means in the Hebrew and also in the Greek in the New Testament. It means authority. It means they would, to have the name of Caesar meant you were in the name of Caesar, right? You're in the authority of Caesar. So Yeshua, he tells us that he's in his father's name. He came in his father's name, his father's authority. So here is an angel in the burning bush speaking to Moses, and he's relaying the idea that, I am, is the one that essentially is also in the Septuagint just calls him the being. Is either one of those his name? No, it's not. It's the authority that is being portrayed. This is why he goes on to elaborate to say, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That is an authority that the Babylonian kings knew about, because they were from, as we read last week, from the land of Canaan. And that interaction during the patriarchal days of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had history with the Canaanites in the land of Canaan. As we read last week, Jacob gives a double portion to Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph, specifically from the land he had taken by war, because the Canaanite kings assembled, 7 of them had assembled to attack Jacob, and he overcame them. And he had this large portion of land that he took from these Canaanites, also tribally called the Amorites of that day, that he had taken from them. And so they all knew who Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were. So now we have this, he's trying to tell this new Pharaoh that had taken over in this lineage of this corruptness that these pharaohs are passing down. It's now 3 pharaohs that are continuing to oppress the Hebrews. The original pharaoh of those 3 that started that a couple generations back was a king of Canaan who had taken over Syria and was ruling over all of Babylon and everywhere that empire stretched. Originally, they knew who the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was. They knew who this guy was. This particular one this new one that Moses is going to go talk to, he may still be out of the loop because he's kind of new and he's just been raised up in the land of Egypt possibly, but he's going to know quickly who this is, just like the Canaanites in previous generations, a couple hundred years earlier, knew very quickly that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was their protector, and they could not overcome Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob while living in the land of Canaan. So this is why Yahweh would be trying to expound and explain that through Moses to this Egyptian king, because like the joke he gonna learn today, right? So this is Pharaoh is gonna learn who the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was. But another thing I want to point out real quick, guys, the angel of the Lord, I highlighted this passage here because I just want to make people hopefully draw your attention to verse 2. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of the bush. I know there's a lot of folks in my audience, and we've talked about this before. I've done videos on this before. I know there's a lot of folks in my audience that truly wholeheartedly believe this was Yeshua. And I just want to lovingly say this is not Yeshua. This is an angel. This is, in fact, this is the same angel that narrates the book of Jubilees. This is not, it's the same angel that we see later in Exodus 23 that's sent before the camp of Israel. It's the same angel that descends in Exodus 33 that we're going to read about later, who actually speaks with Moses face to face. This is an angel. It's a very powerful angel. It's the angel of the presence. It's the same angel that in Leviticus chapter 8-9 literally blesses the tabernacle, shoots fire out of himself to light the sacrificial altar. It's a very powerful angel, but it's not the Son of God. It's not. It's a very different character. And the word God in the Hebrew and in the Greek doesn't always mean the God of heaven and earth or the Son of God. It's often used of angelic beings who are considered rulers with authority sent by the Father. So it's an Elohim class. That word God, especially in a lot of translations like this one I hear have capitalized, that it says God called him from the midst of the bush. Well, this is just a word in the Hebrew. It would say Elohim called him from. That would be a common vernacular referring to an angel. So this is why the angel is sent in agency to give the message that was given to him to pass it on to Moses. So that angel, often referred to as an Elohim, because that's the status of his nature. He's a ruler and authority in the heavenly realms, sent on a mission by the Father, Hebrews 1:14, to minister to those who are inheriting salvation. And part of this right here is ministering unto Moses, this message of hope and this message of a mission to be the deliverer of the sons of Israel. This is not the Son of God. The Son of God is yet to appear, because he has a specific first coming. He doesn't just come and hang out as the king of Salem as Melchizedek. He doesn't come and just show up everywhere. There is messages giving from the Father and the Son to the prophets and through angels. But there's a first coming of the Messiah that's prophesied, and that's when he shows up. He's not running around doing all this light work beforehand, guys. This is light work. So the Son of God's in a much higher authority play. He's got people that do his light work. And this is what we're seeing right here. Okay. This is an angel. This is why it literally tells you it's an angel of the presence. The angel, the Lord of the Lord appeared to him, and he's speaking the message. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at another example of this in scripture in Judges chapter 6, where we see the same concept. Yes, Blue Doves, it's in the Septuagint as well. So let's look at Judges chapter 6, 11 through 14. And an angel of the Lord came and sat down under the fir tree, which was in Epaphra in the land of Joaz, father of Esdri. And Gideon his son was threshing wheat in a winepress in order to escape the face of Midian. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, you mighty in strength." And Gideon said to him, "Be gracious with me, my Lord, but if the Lord is with us, why have these evils found us? And where are all his miracles, which our fathers have related to us, saying, Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? And now he's cast us out and given us into the hand of Midian." And the angel of the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this your strength, and you shall save Israel out of the hand of Midian. Behold, I have sent you." So God, who is sending Gideon? Is God sending Gideon, or is the angel sending Gideon? It's an angel of the Lord who came with a message. That message is, quote, "Go in your strength, and you shall save Israel out of the hand of Midian. Behold, I have sent you." It's not the angel literally doing anything. He's passing on a message. The message is, God is saying this to you. Go in your strength. You shall save Israel out of the hand of Midian. I have sent you. End quote. This is how agency works. This is an Elohim type character that's an angel who has a ton more authority than the average human. He's actually sent on a mission by the Almighty, who has more authority than any angel, and he sends that angel to mankind to give a message. So when that message is quoted, it's not the angel that's doing it. It's the angel whom the angel is representing, right? All right, so let's keep going real quick. And verses 15 to 19, and Gideon said to him, "Be gracious with me, my Lord. Whereby shall I save Israel? Behold, my 1,000 is weakened in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." And the angel of the Lord said to him, "The Lord shall be with you, and you shall smite Midian as one man." And Gideon said to him, If now I have found mercy in your eyes, and you will do this for me, all that you have spoken with me, depart not here until I come to you, and I will bring forth an offering and offer it before you." And he said, "I will remain until you return." So what did we just read? Gideon says to the angel, well, don't leave. Let me set up an offering, and I'll offer the offering before you. That's interesting, right? So he then goes in verse 19. I see someone called in. I'm going to finish reading this little passage, and then we'll bring your call in. Okay, just 1 second. And Gideon went and prepared a kid of the goats and an ephah of fine flour, unleavened. And he put the flesh in the basket and poured the broth into the pot and brought them forth to him. That's Gideon bringing this sacrifice to the angel of the Lord that appeared under this turpentine tree. And he drew close to him. And the angel of the Lord stretched out the end of the rod that was in his hand and touched the flesh and the unleavened bread. And fire came up out of the rock and consumed the flesh and the unleavened bread. And the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. And Gideon saw that he was an angel of the Lord. And Gideon said, aha, Lord my God, for I've seen the angel of the Lord face to face. And the Lord said to him, peace be to you. Fear not, you shall not die. So in the story, we have a message from the angel of the Lord where he speaks the very words of God saying, I send you. And then at the end of the story, Gideon realizes, oh, it was an angel. So whenever you see this concept of you speak face to face, you speak with an Elohim, you're not literally speaking with the Almighty or the Son of God. You don't have to infer that type of eisegesis. The text literally tells you that angels are sent for this purpose, and we see them doing these exact very things all over the scriptures. All right, so we have someone that's called in real quick. I want to bring her in, and this is looks like Miss Diane. Hello, welcome. Shabbat Shalom.
Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Let me get it on the right place. I've got both screens up because I wasn't sure which way I would come up, and I wanted to hear just one voice. I'm sorry about the stuff up behind me. This up here behind me, that's okay. A window, but I was just wondering, I have a Karaite Jewish friend who has studied over 3,000 manuscripts with the name of God, and in that passage it says, I am Yehovah, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it does say I am in the other translations, but he says, I am the one who was, the one who is, and the one who is to come. And I'm coming to more of an understanding on your teaching about these angels of the presence. Now that I've learned that there's 7 angels of the presence. So, I came from a church where they said that was the pre-incarnate Christ. But I was just wondering if you had ever heard of Nehemiah Gordon, Michael Rood's teachings.
Well, doesn't Nehemiah Gordon teach very differently than Michael Rood? Doesn't Nehemiah Gordon, he doesn't believe in Yeshua as the Messiah, does he?
Now, he is not a believer.
Right.
He is a believer in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he has found, like I said, over 3,000 manuscripts. All of them are not Bible manuscripts. Some of them are letters between books and letters between rabbis.
Sure. This is where we get the Masoretic text.
Yeah, and they all spell the name exactly the same. There's no difference in any of the manuscripts. And also the King James Bible does have him in there later on in scriptures where it just don't look right for them to say the Lord, the Lord. So they say the Lord Jehovah in the English, but that was because they added the J later on, and so they updated the English. But the J used to be pronounced like a Y. Yeah.
Right.
Jehovah. It's
actually languages translate from different sounds and consonants, and in the Latin it was an I sound.
Yeah. It was an I, but it was I and the J were supposed to be originally pronounced in English as a Y, as a yeah. They were interchangeable back years ago in Shakespeare, I think.
Around that 14th, 15th century time period for sure.
That there are different groups pronouncing his name different. The reason you would get the Yahweh is the changing of the vowels and not having that center vowel. So you end up, the actual word without the middle vowel is and if you don't have that middle vowel, you can't pronounce it. But sometimes the scribes would mess up and put that center vowel in there. And the vowel pointings, there's speculation that they weren't added until later, but the Hebrews always knew what their vowels were. They may have added when they forgot, when they started talking other languages, and the normal people forgot how to speak Hebrew.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a tradition with the rabbis from the last 1800 years where they want to exclude the pronunciation of the Yohevate. However you would like to pronounce it, they want to exclude that from actually being spoken out loud, which is a sad thing. They have this strange reverence that it's a tradition. It's nowhere in scripture, obviously, but it's a strange reverence put on it to claim that you can't say it out loud. In fact, I was speaking with the wife of a rabbi at a job I used to have, and I had mentioned, she saw my tzitzit, and she's like, "Are you Jewish?" I said, "Well, I don't know, maybe," but I said, "In my heart, I am, right? Because I'm circumcised unto God." And she looked at me estranged, and I said, "But I just worship, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and his son, his only begotten son, Yeshua of Nazareth, my high priest." And she looked at me and she goes, "Oh, son, we don't say his name out loud." And I was like, okay. Well, I was like, "You can do that, but I'm going to praise my father." Yeah, that's fine.
Nehemiah he was raised as an Orthodox Jew.
Yeah.
He became a Karaite when he started studying and reading the Talmud and the Mishnah. Found out that this was always just rabbis talking to rabbis talking to rabbis.
Right.
And he said, why don't we just go back to the Torah itself? But I do believe that God used him in this. I believe God can use anybody. I've had rank sinners correct me on things I should have done years ago. Being a Christian, they seem to know more about the Bible than I did at the time. So, if he can use a donkey, he can use a Karaite Jew who's searching.
Sure. I'd love to have Nehemiah on the show. I've actually reached out to him in the past to try to see if I can interview him for one of these part 2 of my identity crisis series that I'm trying to complete. He's actually one of the interviews that I'm trying to get, but he just, some YouTubers, they're so busy, they get so much emails, they don't respond to everyone that reaches out to them unless there's a formal introduction. So maybe in the future I'll have a chance to speak with him, but I would love to pick his brain.
There is him and Keith Johnson did in 2011. They did a 3-disc series on the name, and he goes into great detail how to say the word I was, I am, and I will be.
Okay.
In the Hebrew language itself, and it's in there. When he's talking to Moses, he tells him, he uses those 3 words and then puts his name together. Yehovah is a conglomeration of those 3 Hebrew words. But
of I was, I am, and I will be.
I was, I am, and I will be. That's the English translation of it.
Okay.
I can't remember how he pronounced the actual Hebrew words, but
I believe we see that in, what is it, Revelation 1?
See that. Revelation 1 too, and I do believe that they have found a copy of Revelation in the Hebrew, but it's not very well known, and I don't know how many copies they found, but they found a lot of copies of different things in the Qumran caves. These were found during the persecution of actual real Christians during the Catholic regime, when they were persecuting Christians because they wanted to keep the Sabbath and try to do the feast instead of what I call sometimes the beast days. Beast. But anyway, they have found. Michael Rood had a guy on for 2 or 3 weeks explaining. They have found almost the whole New Testament in Hebrew.
Okay.
Not just the Hebrew Matthew. Nehemiah found 28 copies of the Hebrew Matthew, and he found them in the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I would like to have Nehemiah, however you like to say it. I'd like to have him on for a couple reasons. One of them is he had a gentleman on his show one time speaking about a large Aramaic library that was found in Elephantine Island. And so this is one that's actually not been explored like the Qumran scrolls.
Yeah.
And so this is one that I would, in the future, Lord willing, I'd love to have an Aramaic scholar go and translate some of those.
Yeah, I wish that man that has that Aramaic copy of, is it Jubilees? I think it is.
It's Enoch. Enoch, yeah.
Enoch out of the Qumran. I wish he would give them to somebody instead of keeping them.
Right. Yeah,
that would really help. I love your study on. I've gone through I've kind of been binging a lot of your studies, and I love your study on Enoch and how we had them back then, and then they lost them, and then all of a sudden they got them back again. I do believe God is revealing these texts so people can see from, they have, when you stand before them, you don't want to say, I said it because so-and-so told me. You want to say, I said it because I found the evidence. Of course, I can't read Hebrew, so I have to depend on, and him is a friend of mine on Facebook. We're not that close, but I have been able to ask him questions, and he does answer.
Okay, well, that's good. Yeah, I know that specifically Enoch. I mean, that is a book that is right out the very beginning of the book. It tells you that it is for the final generation, and it's kind of an interesting claim for a book like that. And so it's definitely one that, even if we found even the manuscripts that were found with the Dead Sea Scrolls of various languages, and supposedly there's full Aramaic of it, just like it was in the Ge'ez, but it's still going to be a full Aramaic of the book of First Enoch, and this is why I did a full breakdown on the book of First Enoch in my Honor of Kings season 2 playlist. It's the final episode of that season, where I break down all the manuscripts and how the book of First Enoch is a compilation of multiple manuscripts that has been put together, and of those manuscripts, they're fragments. They're not all there in their entirety. So this is where, even if we had this elusive full Aramaic version, it's still a full version of this compilation of partial manuscripts. So the big question for most people would arise: where's the rest of these partial manuscripts that have been compiled and called the Book of First Enoch?
I can guarantee you one thing: they're going to be up there when we get up there. We will have forever to study them all.
Sure. Yeah, we'll get the 3D holographic slideshow from the angels about all these historical details from the past. Yeah, it'll be much better.
Please is right. All the books are up there. Every book.
Sure.
I did want to ask you one thing about what I'm not trying to keep you too long,
okay.
But what do you think about Amram and Jochebed being aunt and nephew?
I'm not sure where you're getting that information.
If you have to really read through the genealogy in Exodus, in the first chapter there, where it starts giving that. If you will read it closely, you will see that Amram is Jochebed's nephew. I know a lot of people. Anyway, just later on, maybe you can study it, but think about it, and I would have to. I don't have my Bible open. I'm just listening to you because you're going faster than I can look through the Bible and get the other books out and look at them. And but in my reading through that genealogy, it seems that Amram is, Jochebed's. Amram's the husband, and Jochebed is the wife, right? And it looks to me like she's his aunt.
What verse are you thinking about?
I'll have to look it up then.
Yeah, because I'm not seeing anything about that in chapter 1, even regardless of their genealogy.
Yeah.
Regardless of that theory, I mean, it is very common for the Hebrews to have very similar names within families, especially within tribal families. And of course, this is the same tribe of Levi.
And because they were of the tribe of Levi, they had to stay within their tribe to marry. I do understand that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, before Moses, when he changed some of the rights to marry, like Abraham did marry his half sister or something. Sarah was his half sister. And some people want to say God had all of the Torah from Adam all the way down, but some things didn't apply to those early generations, did they?
Well, Jubilees actually tries to address that, and I think it's Jubilees 34, specifically with the story of Reuben and Bilhah. But there is an angel that tries to explain to him that that particular law was not given to mankind. Otherwise, Reuben would have had been killed.
Yeah,
Because
that's what I was thinking. It was brought up later after the genome got a little more corrupt, and there were people to marry.
There's a lot of speculation about that because you kind of, you work backwards and you go back to the story of Cain and Abel and who did they marry? Well, you see that Jubilees tells you they married their sisters. So it's you kind of go through this idea of there's certain things that were allowed so that man could flourish, but then later on it was kind of like, hey, let's abide by the fullness of the Torah. This is what we've said on Kingdom in Context for a long time, is that a good 90 to 95% of God's instructions from heaven were given to mankind, to the patriarchs. But once we get to Mount Sinai, we start to see there's a broader fullness that's given out, specifically regarding all the particulars of the law and the detailed ones, even the little detailed ones like you're talking about, which is in Leviticus 18, in addition to all the instructions about the priesthood interacting inside of the copy and the shadow of the heavenly temple, which they call the tabernacle on the ground. So there is more instruction given at Sinai, but it's a renewal of the covenant, which actually I'm going to explain here in a little bit. So I will have to cut this interaction a little short, but
I got to go. I didn't want to stay that long, but I did want you to think about that question, because in my reading, I have figured it out that she was his aunt. She was his father's sister, and they married. And I do know that I don't know how many Levites they had at the time, but the Levites tried to stay within the Levite families. So not a sister, but or a brother. It was she was an aunt, and she was from his father's sister, and it's in there somewhere. I've just got to find it. I just thought about that while you were talking, and I'm gonna go. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to keep you this long.
It's okay. It's all right. This is what I appreciate the call in, and it's good talk, good interaction.
I do appreciate it. And I will look it up again, so I'll learn what chapter and verse.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Diane. Have a good Shabbat.
I'm still in the chat.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Okay, guys, let's jump back into. We're gonna hit up here. 4, I believe, is where we left off. We finished up Judges 6. So let's go to chapter 4 real quick, and then it says here in 1 through 5. I'm sorry. Work. Moses said, "What if they do not believe me or listen to what I say? For they may say, the Lord has not appeared to you." The Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" And he said, "A staff." Then he said, "Throw it on the ground." So Moses threw it on the ground, and it turned into a serpent, and Moses fled from it. But the Lord said to Moses, "Reach out your hand and grasp it by the tail." So he reached out with his hand and caught it, and it turned into a staff in his hand, so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. The Lord furthermore said to him, "Now put your hand inside the fold of your robe." So he put his hand inside the fold, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. Then he said, "Put your hand inside the fold of your robe again." So he put it into the fold again, and when he took it out of the fold, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. So if they will not believe you, nor pay attention to the evidence of the first sign, they may believe the evidence of the last sign. But if they will not believe even these 2 signs, nor pay attention to what you say, then you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water which you take from the Nile will turn into blood on the dry ground. Then Moses said to the Lord, "Please, Lord, I've never been so eloquent, neither recently nor in times past, nor since you have spoken to your servant, for I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." But the Lord said to him, "Who has made the human mouth? Or who makes anyone unable to speak or deaf or able to see or be blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now then go, and I myself will be with your mouth and instruct you in what you are to say." But he said, "Please, Lord, now send the messenger by whomever you will." Then the anger of the Lord burned against Moses, and he said, "Is there not your brother Aaron the Levite? I know that he speaks fluently." And moreover, behold, he is coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he will be overjoyed. So you are to speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I myself will be with your mouth and his mouth, and I will instruct you in what you are to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he will be as a mouth for you, and you will be as a God to him. And you shall take in your hand this staff with which you shall perform the signs. Then Moses departed and returned to his father-in-law Jethro, and said to him, Please let me go, that I may return to my brothers who are in Egypt, and see if they are still alive. And Jethro said to Moses, Go in peace. Now the Lord said to Moses in Midian, Go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead. So Moses took his wife and his sons and mounted them on a donkey and returned to the land of Egypt. Moses also took the staff of God in his hand. And the Lord said to Moses, When you go back to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders which I have put in your power. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, This is what the Lord says. Israel is my son, my firstborn. So I said to you, Let my son go so that he may serve me. But you have refused to let him go. Behold, I am going to kill your son, your firstborn. But it came about at the overnight encampment on the way that the Lord met Moses and sought to put him to death. So Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and threw it at Moses' feet. And she said, You are indeed a groom of blood to me. So he left him alone. And at that time, she said, You are a groom of blood because of the circumcision. Now the Lord said to Aaron, Go to meet Moses in the wilderness. So he went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord with which he had sent him and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. Then Moses and Aaron went and assembled all the elders of the sons of Israel. And Aaron spoke all the words which the Lord had spoken to Moses. He then performed the signs in front of the people. So the people believed, and when they had heard that the Lord was concerned about the sons of Israel and that he had seen their affliction, they bowed low and worshipped. So guys, I just wanted to take a quick moment to point out that this part right here in verse 27, a lot of folks don't realize that the mountain of God is where Moses had the burning bush experience, and it's where Aaron comes out to meet meet Moses. People overlook this really easily. And guys, this is Sinai. So I'm going to show you here. I have a little I've assembled this little comparison just to show you that in Exodus 3:1, this is where Moses is pasturing the flocks of his father-in-law Jethro, and he came to Horeb, which is the mountain of God. So there's three names that's used in the scriptures in the Old Testament for Mount Sinai. It's Horeb, the mountain of God, and Sinai. So by contextual association, you should be able to see on screen here Exodus 3:1 on the top left. On the top right is Exodus 3:12. Where it says at the bottom of it, when you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain. This is during the chapter 3 of the burning bush experience that we just read. And this is in Deuteronomy 5:2, the Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. That's Mount Sinai. And then Malachi 4:4, remember the law of Moses, my servant, the statutes and ordinances which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel. Now, these are the mentions. Obviously, we already know it's called the Mount Sinai, a whole bunch of other places, but these are the specific mentions of this particular mountain as being also called the mountain of God or Mount Horeb. So it had three different names in Scripture, just like Jethro also had the name Ruel in Scripture as well, as we see in Exodus 18. So just a lot of people kind of overlook this idea that this quote-unquote mountain of God, and why is it even being called a mountain of God? Well, that's where our companion passage comes in, Jubilees 4:26. So it's for the Lord has four places on the earth: the Garden of Eden, the Mount of the East, which a lot of people believe is the Mount of Olives, and this mountain on which you are this day, Mount Sinai, and Mount Zion. So, and the reason why number 3 is a much longer description is because it's an angel speaking to Moses throughout the entire book of Jubilees, and he's explained to him while Moses is on the mountain during the 40 days and 40 nights, he's given him the book of Jubilees. This is why he says, and this mountain which you are at this day, and I'm speaking to you, which is Mount Sinai. This is also the mountain that's called Horeb, and also referred to as the mountain of God, because it's one of the four places of the Lord on the earth. just like these other 3 places. So that's why it's called the mountain of God in Exodus and in Deuteronomy and other places. But it's also regionally, it was called Mount Sinai. And then also it was specifically called Mount Horeb to I believe, the Midianites. So that's why it has 3 different names, but it's also special. That's why it was a unique place. And the Father wanted them to go to this unique place for a reason. And we're going to cover that here in just a minute. But let's read our companion passage in 1st Enoch real quick. This is in chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. It's actually going to mention Mount Sinai in here because Jubilees just tells us from the moment that the earth was created, there's 4 places on the earth that are the Lord's, that he claims to be, quote unquote, his. One of them is Mount Sinai. It's always been there. It was there before the flood, and it's there after the flood. So here it is in 1st Enoch 1 through 5. It says, the words of the blessing of Enoch, wherewith he blessed the elect and the righteous, who will be living in the day of tribulation, when all the wicked and godless are to be removed. And he took up his parable and said, Enoch, a righteous man, whose eyes were opened by God, saw the vision of the Holy One in the heavens, which the angel showed me. And from them I heard everything, and from them I understood as I saw. But not for this generation, but for a remote one, which is for to come. Concerning the elect, I said, and took up a parable concerning them. The Holy Great One will come forth from his dwelling, and the eternal God will tread upon the earth, even on Mount Sinai, and appear from his camp, and appear in the strength of his might from the heaven of heavens. And all shall be smitten with fear, and the watchers shall quake, and great fear and trembling shall seize them unto the ends of the earth. And then it goes on to say in 6 through 9, all the high mountains will be shaken, the high hills will be made low, and shall melt like wax before the flame. The earth shall be wholly rent in sunder, and all that is upon the earth shall perish. There shall be a judgment upon all men, but with the righteous he will make peace, and he will protect the elect, and mercy shall be upon them. And they shall belong to God, and they shall be prospered, and they shall all be blessed, and he will help them all, and light shall appear unto them, and he will make peace with them. And behold, he comes with 10,000 of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all, and to destroy all the ungodly, and to convict all flesh of all the works of their ungodliness, which they have ungodly committed, and of the hard things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Just as a real quick caveat, guys, I just want to let you guys know that the usage of in the book of 1st Enoch and how it's translated, you have to look at the context and understand it. It also helps to compare, the major and minor prophets and in the Bible that we do have and are well familiar with today, what we generically refer to as the American canon of 66. So Ezekiel, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Zephaniah, Amos, all those different prophets, they talk about the same moment here as well. So these first 9 verses of 1st Enoch talks about the return of the Lord, and the descriptions therein speak about the earth and men upon the earth being completely destroyed. Well, that's a generic English translation for the word land, because remember, from the Hebrew, the word land just means the haaretz. So it could be used of the whole earth, or it could be used of a specific piece of land. And this is the specific piece of land that all the prophets talk about, where all the men are wiped away from it. This is Matthew 13, 49 to 51, as well as Joel 3, and as well as a whole bunch of other verses where the 10,000 godly angels that return with Yeshua to fight on the day of the Lord, they rout everyone away from the land of promise, which is the land where the New Jerusalem is going to set down. So this 1,500 square mile region, this zone, they're going to come in and move everyone out of that region, out of that zone. And that is where Zechariah 14 tells us there's also a massive earthquake that happens in there that splits the land open, just like it said here in verse 7, that the earth is rent sunder. It means it's split in two, just like Zechariah 14 talks about. This is just the land within where the New Jerusalem is going to sit down. So there's some shifting and there's some geographical changes to prepare this area for the New Jerusalem to come down and sit down here. The whole earth, the rest of the plane of the earth, there will be survivors. We've gone over multiple videos of that there are. I mean, it says in Isaiah 66, 18 through 22, a whole bunch of other places. There's survivors who come to the New Jerusalem after it descends. They have to for the sheep and goats judgment. So just to give you some perspective of what we just read, it's a loose English translation. It's speaking specifically about the region where the New Jerusalem is going to sit down. That's the place that's going to be broken, destroyed completely, burned with fire. All men and animals will be removed from that place because the Father's going to sit down a huge house there. So you don't want to get squished by the big house. You're going to have to get out of the way. So let's go to Exodus chapter 5, and we'll pick up here in chapter 5. It says, "And afterward Moses and Aaron came and said to Pharaoh, 'This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go so they may celebrate a feast to me in the wilderness.' But Pharaoh said, 'Who is the Lord that I shall obey his voice to let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and besides, I will not let Israel go.' Then they said, 'The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness so that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. Otherwise, he will strike us with plague or with sword.' But the king of Egypt said to them, 'Moses and Aaron, why do you let the people neglect their work? Get back to your labors.' Again, Pharaoh said, 'Look, the people of the land are now many, and you would have them cease from their labors.' So the same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters over the people and their foremen, saying, 'You are no longer given the people to straw. You are no longer to give the people straw to make bricks as previously. Have them go and gather straw for themselves, but you shall impose on them the quota of bricks which they were making before. You are not to reduce any of it, because they are lazy. For that reason they cry out, "Let us go and sacrifice to our God." Yet let the labor be heavier on the men, and have them work at it so that they will pay no attention to false words.' So the taskmasters of the people and their foremen went out and spoke to the people, saying, 'This is what Pharaoh says. I am not going to give you any straw. You go, get straw for yourselves, wherever you can find it, but none of your labor will be reduced.' So the people scattered through all the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw, and the taskmasters pressed them, saying, 'Complete your work quota, your daily amount, just as when you had straw.' Moreover, the foremen of the sons of Israel, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and asked, 'Why have you not completed your required task of making bricks, either yesterday or today as before?' Then the foreman of the sons of Israel came and cried out to Pharaoh, saying, 'Why do you deal this way with your servants? There is no straw given to your servants, yet they keep saying to make bricks. And behold, your servants are being beaten, but it is the fault of your own people.' But he said, 'You are lazy, very lazy. For that reason you say, "Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord"? So go now and work, for you will be given no straw, but you must deliver the quota of bricks.' The foreman of the sons of Israel saw that they were in trouble, since they were told, 'You must not reduce your daily amount of bricks.' When they left Pharaoh's presence, they met Moses and Aaron as they were waiting for them. And they said to Moses and Aaron, 'May the Lord look upon you and judge you, because you have made us repulsive in Pharaoh's sight and in the sight of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to kill us.' And then Moses returned to the Lord and said, 'Lord, why have you brought harm to this people? Why did you ever send me? Ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done harm to this people, and you have not rescued your people at all.'" We're going to read the last little moment here, verse 6, to finish up. "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For under compulsion he will let them go, and under compulsion he will drive them out of this land.'" So, guys, there's so much in here. There's a lot going on in this chapter, in these chapters here, but I just want to point out some things real quick. At the very beginning of this, Moses and Aaron go up to Pharaoh. They say to him in verse 1, "Let my people go. For why? So they may go celebrate a feast to me in the wilderness." So this is where, to combat, this is Torah apologetics, right? So to combat some of the misconceptions that have been passed down over time in mainstream Christianity, people think that the law of God, which is synonymous with the term the law of Moses, right? They think that the law of Yahweh was only given at Mount Sinai, and that it was some sort of special agreement, special covenant just with the Israelites, just with the quote-unquote Jews. No, that's not true at all. This whole passage, these whole chapters we've been reading, Yahweh speaks of these Israelites that are in oppression as his sons, as the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, with whom he has already made covenants. They're the descendants who are included in that covenant. And Moses and Aaron are asking Pharaoh to let these people go so they can do what? So they can celebrate a feast. That's a covenant term. They're wanting to go celebrate a feast with Yahweh. What is this feast? It's going to be Shavuot. So this is the whole purpose. And Pharaoh knows what a feast is. It's a Sabbath day, just like Leviticus 23 explains, just like Jubilees 6 explains. It's a Sabbath day. That's why Pharaoh says they're lazy. Because what do you do on a Sabbath day? You don't work. And that's why he keeps saying you're lazy, because you're asking me not to work. You want to celebrate a rest day. So they knew what this stuff was. This was not new information. This is, hopefully I want to bring people into the mindset of realizing how much the law of God is just everywhere throughout all of Genesis and throughout Exodus, even until we get up to the point of Exodus 19. It's everywhere. It is the motivation for everything that's happening. They're trying to go fulfill the terms of the covenant that they're in. And Pharaoh is wanting to not let them do that. He even knows, they understand these terms, that a feast to a god means you take a day off of work and you have a feast. The pagans even celebrated like this when they celebrated their feasts to Set and Ptah and Osiris and Ra. The Egyptians knew what a feast day was. So it's just crazy to see that people would, this is this mindset of seminary trained men who are taught this idea of supersessionism or dispensation theology, that God dealt differently with the Jews than he does with Christians. And you're like, guys, that's not even true at all, man. We've got to read take seriously these words that are in the text and look at the context that's given to us. They're trying to go celebrate a feast. Where? As Exodus 3:12 tells us, on this mountain of God, which is the Mount Sinai, where Moses had this burning bush moment the whole time. To begin with, he had this moment of meeting this angel on Mount Sinai, and he's like, hey, I want you to bring people all back to this mountain so we can celebrate Shavuot. Why? Well, it says down here in verse 3, Moses and Aaron say to Pharaoh, please let us go a 3 days journey in the wilderness so that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. Otherwise, he will strike us with plague or with sword. Why would he do that? If they weren't in covenant, why would he hold them accountable to celebrate a feast through actual physical consequence if they don't celebrate that feast? So this is Moses and Aaron looking at Pharaoh and going, look, man, we got to go. Like our God is calling, and we need to go fulfill the terms of the covenant we made with our God. You really need to let us go, because if not, bad things are going to happen to us. And by the way, you've been saying this all the time. We're your workforce. We're numerous in the land, and we work for you, and you're getting a lot out of us. But our God's might strike us with plague. Some translations say pestilence. The Septuagint says death. But Moses and Aaron are trying to warn Pharaoh, like, if we don't go do this, our God could take it out on us. Why would they even think that, guys? Why would Moses and Aaron even say this statement? Are they lying to Pharaoh? Are they trying to manipulate him? No, they're not. This is actually a part of the covenant. They're asked to participate in these festivals. That was this, and let's look at our companion passages where we'll see where this is spoken to the patriarchs. But this is why it was such a big deal to try to get all the Israelites to come out of Egypt so they could go 3 days and celebrate this feast. Did you guys realize that the entire story of the Exodus was hinging upon a feast day? The whole contention was upon the feast day of Shavuot. The enemy was trying to keep them from celebrating it, and Moses and Aaron were trying to get the people to understand they needed to come celebrate it. The whole thing is fighting for Torah. And the Father is about to destroy an entire nation that was oppressing his people because he would not let them go keep the Torah. So this is why this is why Jubilees 6 talks about this. Okay. Verses 10 through 13, Jubilees 6. And Noah and his sons swore that they would. This is Noah now. Okay. So we went back a little bit. We're gonna get back to Moses. All right. But we're giving you some context of history. So this is Noah and his sons swore that they would not eat any blood that was in any flesh. And he made a covenant before the Lord God forever throughout all the generations of the earth in this month. And this is the 3rd month. And I'm going to explain that here in a minute. On this account, he spoke to you that you should make a covenant with the children of Israel in this month upon the mountain with an oath, and that you should sprinkle blood upon them because of all the words of the covenant which the Lord made with them forever. And this testimony is written concerning that you should observe it continually, so that you not eat on any day any blood of beasts or animals or cattle during all the days of the earth. And the man who eats the blood of beasts or of cattle or of the birds during all the days of the earth, he and his seed shall be rooted out of the land. And do you command the children of Israel to not eat blood, so that their names and their seed may be before the Lord our God continually. And for this law there is no limit of days; it is forever. They shall observe it throughout the generations, so that they may continue supplicating on your behalf with blood before the altar, every day and at the time of morning and evening they shall seek forgiveness on your behalf, perpetually before the Lord, that they may keep it and not be rooted out. And he gave to Noah and his sons a sign, that there should not again be a flood on the earth. He set his bow in the cloud for a sign of the eternal covenant, that there should not again be a flood on the earth to destroy it all the days of the earth. For this reason, it's ordained and written on the heavenly tablets that you should celebrate the Feast of Weeks, that's Shavuot, in this month once a year to renew the covenant every year. And this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah. Guys, the rainbow, Genesis 9, the rainbow that Moses saw, the sacrifice he's doing in Genesis 9, he's celebrating Shavuot. Jubilees is telling you this is why Jubilees, the narrative here in Jubilees 6 is the angel on Mount Sinai explaining to Moses, this is why I brought you here. This is why we're celebrating this feast. This is the history of this feast. Abraham kept it. Noah kept it. Noah kept it off the boat. The angels in heaven keep it since creation. Think about that for a second. That's how important it is to the Father. Because his Torah, his law, his ways, his behavior is kept in heaven as well. All the angels in heaven keep this feast. They keep all the feasts, by the way, but this is in this moment, in the context of this particular feast, the angels explain to Moses, all your forefathers kept it, and the angels in heaven keep it. This is a big deal. And it's to renew the covenant every year. So he goes on to say, this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah. 26 Jubilees, 5 weeks of years, and Noah and his sons observed it for 7 Jubilees and 1 week of years till the day of Noah's death. And from the days of Noah's death, his sons did away with it. Now, this is not Shem, but his other extended sons, as we know they started rebelling that led to the Tower of Babel. Until the days of Abraham, they ate blood. But Abraham observed it. So this is the angel telling Moses, Abraham observed Shavuot. And Isaac and Jacob, they observed it. In fact, we see that in Jubilees, I think it's 44. Jacob is observing Shavuot with old grain. And his children observed it up to your days. And in your days, the children of Israel forgot it until you celebrated it anew on this mountain. And do you command the children of Israel to observe this festival in all the generations for a commandment to them? One day in the year, in this month, they shall celebrate the festival, for it is the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of First Fruits. This feast is twofold. It's a double nature, according to what is written and engraved concerning it. Celebrate it. How beautiful is this, guys? So I just want to remind you guys that this, again, this is an incredibly important, because this is the renewal of the covenant every year with mankind and the Father. Yes, the Father has mercy, and if people do not keep this every year, you're not going to be smitten, okay? You're not going to be struck down, you know what I'm saying? Clearly, because like in this conversation, the angel's telling Moses, all these people kept it, but then up until your day, your generation, Moses, that's when they forgot it, and they haven't been keeping it. So this is why Moses has to go in. He's trying to get these people to come and keep it with him. But Pharaoh's causing a problem. Now, people, and this is why Moses and Aaron are saying, lest the Lord strike us with pestilence or war. And I'm going to explain those two reasons that they gave here in just a minute from Scripture. But this whole concept is, it's not like if you just don't keep it 1 year, then he's going to kill you. It's not out like that at all. I mean, think about the hundreds of years that Israel was in rebellion after they was already taken into the land of promise and were as a function as a nation, that they were in blatant rebellion and weren't keeping the terms of the covenant. And the Father didn't just show up and start killing people, you know what I'm saying? But natural consequences start happening because they stopped doing the covenant behavior. We're going to read about those here in just a minute. So it's not like, he's not just sitting there with his finger on the button going, are they going to keep it this year? It's not like that. But it is a command that you should keep it every year, once a year. You should do it. This is a one-day celebration. It's twofold. It's the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of First Fruits together. It's called both things. And so he wants you to, just like he wants you to keep Passover and Shavuot, Feast of Unleavened Bread, trumpets, all that kind of stuff, just like the Day of Atonement, right? It's 1 day out of the year to keep it to cleanse the sins of Israel once a year. I mean, that's also explained in Jubilees as well. So the idea is that Moses and Aaron are realizing because they're being commanded, bring these people out to the Mount Sinai to celebrate this feast. You're going to have to go through Pharaoh first to do that, but he will let them go under compulsion. He'll let them do it because they're realizing, as Moses has been told, well, Moses gets told this later at Mount Sinai, that they had stopped keeping it, but Moses already knew that, right? Because he grew up amongst them. And as a result of the oppression that had come upon them, they were being, evil schemes were being brought upon the Hebrews from the Egyptians, as Exodus chapter 1 told us. So what happens when the enemy, specifically Babylonian trained enemy, comes in and he starts to oppress you and wants to keep you from doing the behavior of Yahweh, to graft you into his nation and to do his behavior? Oh, and consequently, I'm also going to make you a servant and put you in servitude as well. So this is a tactic of the enemy that we see all throughout history, and this is just another example of it in the days of the Egyptians and the Hebrews in the land of Goshen. So hopefully that's a little bit. I'm going to go into Genesis 15 because we're going to actually look at this moment here in Genesis 15 is actually Abraham keeping Shavuot as well. So in Genesis 15, 12 through 16, it says, when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. He said unto Abram, know of surety that your seed shall be a stranger in a land that's not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve I will judge, and after shall they come out with great substance. And they shall go to your fathers in peace, and you shall be buried, and you shall be buried in a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall come here again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. And it came to pass that when the sun went down, it was dark. Behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp passed between the pieces. And the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto you, seed, have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenizzites, the Kenizzites, the Kenizzites, the Cabonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaims, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So let's look real quick at Jubilees chapter 14. It's the same passage that we just saw from Genesis 15 of Abraham doing the same sacrifice. And this is something I want to point out real quick, guys. This is more detail of the same moment from Genesis 15, but I hope to clear up misconceptions that have been passed down over time, specifically amongst like Torah crowds, right? Where they've been told that Genesis 15 is a special type of covenant that is irregular to the rest of Scripture. They've been told it's this thing called a threshold covenant, where you'd put the actual sacrificial meal, the pieces of the animal, on the ground, and then you'd walk through them, and then the thing that was passing between the pieces, this lantern that they saw in the vision, it's literally just like we saw in Gideon in Judges chapter 6. The angel lit the fire of the sacrifice. That's the same thing happening in Genesis 15. The pieces of the animals are not put on the ground. Let's read right here. He makes an actual altar like you're supposed to, of unhewn stone, raised up off the earth. This is the same Torah that Abraham's keeping, that is instructed throughout all of Israel. It's not a different, you never put sacrifice, you're not supposed to put sacrifices on the dirt, on the soil, all right? It's supposed to be on some sort of surface that's prepared for sacrifice. So the soil has never been described as one of them, okay? Jubilees 14, 10 through 15. He says, he, that's Abraham, took all these sacrifices the middle of the third month, and he dwelt at the oak of Mamre, which is near Hebron. And he built there an altar and sacrificed all these, and he poured their blood upon the altar and divided them in the midst and laid them over against each other. But the birds divided he not. And the birds came down upon the pieces, but Abraham drove them away and did not suffer the birds to touch them. And it came to pass, when the sun had set, that an ecstasy fell upon Abram, and lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And it was said unto Abraham, know of surety that your seed shall be a stranger in a land that's not theirs. They shall bring them into bondage and afflict them for 400 years. And the nation also to whom they will be in bondage will I judge. And after that they shall come forth from there with much substance. And you shall go to your fathers in peace, and be buried in a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. And Abram awoke from his sleep, and he arose, and the sun had set, and there was a flame, and behold, a furnace was smoking, and a flame of fire passed between the pieces. And on that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your seed will I give this land, from the river of the Egypt until the great river, the Euphrates, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cabonites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Phecharites, the Hivites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. And the day passed, and Abraham offered the pieces and the birds and their fruit offerings and their drink offerings, and the fire devoured them. And on that day we made a covenant with Abraham, according as we had covenanted with Noah in this month. And Abraham renewed the festival and ordinance for himself forever. All right, guys, so I'm trying to show you here that we are linking together the Feast of Shavuot. That is such an important moment that Yahweh sends an angel to Moses, rally the troops, get these people to come participate in this covenant behavior. And the back history of this particular feast is that it's also the moment of Genesis 15 with this amazing covenant moment with Abraham, as well as Genesis 9 with this amazing covenant moment after the flood with Noah. The rainbow is literally associated as the sign of the covenant over Shavuot. It's a beautiful thing. This is a very important concept that he's trying to get these children of Israel who've been in Egypt too long. Now they're being oppressed, and they're actually got their religion of Egypt in them as well. And the Father realizes they need to start practicing my behavior again. And I want to pull them out and bring them to this feast on this particular mountain in this particular month, which will be the third month by the time they get there. So this is the whole point. Why? Because what Moses and Aaron said to Pharaoh, if we don't, he may strike us with pestilence or war. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from the covenant, promises of blessings and curses. Deuteronomy 28, 15, 21, and 25. Verse 15, it says, but it shall come to pass, if you will hearken your voice to the Lord your God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command you this day, that all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you. I'm sorry. I think I read that wrong at the very beginning. He says, if you will not hearken your voice, then all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. And then he goes and lists a whole bunch of things. And amongst the things he lists is verses 21 and 25. And verse 21 says, the Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto you until you have consumed you from the land where you go to possess it. This is the pestilence and the plague that's mentioned by Moses and Aaron. Then in verse 25, the Lord shall cause you to be smitten before your enemies, that you shall go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them, and shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. This is being oppressed by war, right? This is the curse of falling into warfare and losing and being at the hand of your enemies. And this is a result of not doing the covenant behavior that's required of Israel. There's more, but these are two of the big ones that we see happen throughout history through Israel. And this is what Moses and Aaron are trying to get Pharaoh to let them go keep the terms of the covenant, because they've already been slack. The children of Israel in the land of Goshen had already been negligent of keeping the terms of the covenant for some time now throughout the generation of Moses. I mean, at this point in the story, Moses is 80 years old. So just like we see in the future history, I should say, of ancient Israel, where they stop keeping the terms of the covenant over long periods of time, have rebellion throughout the books of Judges and Kings and Chronicles. There's a good king, there's a bad king, there's a good king, there's a bad king. And then, suddenly, like the days of Hezekiah, he was finally a good king, and they hadn't kept Passover since a long time, for a long time, over 100 and something years. That's an extremely important feast of the covenant. It's one of the things commanded in Leviticus 23, Exodus 23, and Numbers 28. It's very important, and also Deuteronomy 16. So what I'm trying to say is the Father does have a moment of mercy. He has an extended period of mercy, right? But they all willingly went into this covenant, and it's actually something they renew every year. This is why at the base of Mount Sinai in Exodus 19, he's telling them, here's the instructions of this covenant, and they all say, yeah, we'll do these things. Everything you say, we will do. That's them re-upping the covenant, just like Noah did, just like Abraham did. I mean, and if you read further on in Jubilees 19, also in chapter 22, it even takes this same blessing with the same covenant all the way back to Adam. Why? Because like the angel said in Jubilee 6, it's the same feast that they keep in heaven. Even the angels in heaven keep it. So it's a huge, huge deal. So I hope to bring some perspective to this story that we're stepping into here in the book of Exodus, where Pharaoh he's not being arbitrary for the sake of just being arbitrary. Father didn't harden his heart just for the sake of trying to create drama. The Father hardens people's heart in the way that it already wants to go. The Pharaoh, like we've read multiple passages last week and this week, we're in the third king of Egypt now, the third Pharaoh, who's picked up this same trait of trying to cause division between the people of Egypt and the Hebrews in Goshen. And he's also now starting to oppress, not just with disdain, like we saw from last week, but now with actual slavery. He's trying to oppress the Hebrews and make everything their fault, but he doesn't want to let them leave. He doesn't want to kick them out of the country. He just wants to make them the bad guy and oppress them, right? This is pure evil. This is unjust rulership, okay? So his heart already is against, which would be the behavior of Joseph, the predecessor to these pharaohs that had created such peace in the land and used Egypt to become this financial powerhouse for all the world because of how Joseph enacted the Torah, as we explained a couple weeks ago. The whole Egypt was saved by the Torah, and because of the Torah, Egypt's about to be destroyed. Because now they've turned on the keepers of the Torah, or what was supposed to be. Now Egypt is trying to get the keepers of the Torah to stop keeping the Torah, the very thing that saved their nation, saved almost the entire world through the days of Joseph. The Father is going to defend his Torah and his covenant kids, his covenant people. So it's like I guess, hopefully to bring some perspective that this whole storyline that we're seeing, it's not just because the Father's trying to do something to showboat or to show off his powers or whatever, or to intentionally cause problems with the Egyptians. The Egyptians were literally murdering babies to try to kill, to try to kill off the Hebrews and stop them. As they oppressed them in multiple ways, now they've got them in slavery. And the Father is just sitting there going, they're trying to do my behavior. Now you've got them to the point where you're being a snare to them, where they're going against my behavior. And now they're starting to, as we're going to see in following chapters, a lot of the Israelites who now come out of the Exodus, they have a lot of Egypt in them and they want to worship the Baals still. So the Father doesn't like that, right? They're his covenant kids. He doesn't want them doing idolatry. So he needs to save them. He needs to bring them out of that mindset, which sometimes means you have to be removed from those influences. And that's what the Father's trying to do. He's trying to defend his covenant with his people and get them to keep that covenant behavior, which is his Torah, his instructions. So hopefully this has been a blessing to you guys. Hopefully this has given you some good perspective, if you will, on why all this drama at the beginning of the book of Exodus. Why are they even going to this mountain anyway? Why is it such a big? Why couldn't they just, like Pharaoh is going to say, and I think it's chapter 9, he's like, why don't you just sacrifice here in the land? What's wrong? You got your animals, you got good land, just sacrifice here. What's the point? Why do you have to go somewhere else? Why do you have to leave? So I hopefully gave you some context to why we're going to reach that, why Pharaoh's struggling with this mentality, because he's not aware or doesn't have the heart to keep the Father's law. But this is what Moses and Aaron, who are trying to help their brethren keep the Father's law, which is what Malachi 2:4-7 says is the job of a priest. This is why this drama unfolds. It's a beautiful story. So guys, if you have any questions, I'll take a couple questions real quick. Otherwise, we're already here at an hour and 40 minutes, but put your questions in all caps. I think I saw a few earlier on. I want to say thank you to, was it Chilo Gonzalez? I think I saw you dropped a super chat earlier. I really appreciate that, brother. Really appreciate you doing that. Let me see here. I thought I saw a question up here earlier. Salty Taco is asking, does the New Jerusalem that comes down resemble the temple described in Ezekiel? The temple in Ezekiel chapter 40-48, well, it's 40-43 specifically is the temple description, but all the descriptions, because even in chapter 47, verse 12 is the river of life that is obviously inside the temple. That's the same one in Revelation 22, 1-5, the river of life that comes out underneath the throne of God. The descriptions of Ezekiel chapter 40-48 is the interior of the 1,500 square mile New Jerusalem that's described in Revelation 21 and 22. Okay? So you get the bigger descriptions in Revelation, you get the minute interior descriptions in Ezekiel. So I hope that's helpful for you. Looking for another question if there's any real quick. Funky Monkey Painting is asking, how do you and your family celebrate Shavuot? Well, we just have a memorial meal. That's really all you can do. We're not Levite priests. There's no standing temple that's been ordained by God. There's no priesthood that's been ordained by God right now. All that's been prophesied to have been taken away while we're in this dispersion until Yeshua returns. We're all regathered at the great resurrection, taken to Jerusalem. And that is, so that's when we'll get to fully celebrate all the details of these feasts. Again, right now, we just do our best to keep a memorial. We just have a celebratory meal, and we do celebrate it as a Sabbath. So I don't work on that day. My wife doesn't work on that day. And we just make a meal, you know. Yes, many times we actually make lamb, you know, as we'll do some lamb steaks or something, but we just have a day of rest and make a meal and enjoy it and just, you know, memorialize it as best we can while we're, you know, dispersed in metaphoric Egypt and Babylon all across the plane of the earth. So it's all we can do at this point in context of the actual instructions. All right, Blue Doves is asking, next week's portion, it will be Exodus 6 through 12, about there. Also, are the other writings similar to the short story you presented at the beginning, which was lovely, by the way? Are the other writings similar to the other? I'm not sure what other writings. I mean, I have other writings that I used to write short stories, and I actually have a novel that I need to finish rewriting because it's not completed yet. I need to rewrite parts of it. It's like a big novel, a 3-part series that I did about the 100 years leading up to the flood of Noah. But I'm not sure what other writings you're referring to right here. But ultimately, yeah, just look up next week. We'll do the portions. I'm going to try to get out the portion, my particular pairings that I do with this portion for next week. I'm going to try to get them out on my socials and on my channel sooner this week. I was just busier this week, but I apologize. I'm not understanding your entire question, Miss Blue Doves. All right, looks like we got a caller calling in for a question. Hey, how you doing, Gilbert?
Shabbat Shalom. How you doing, brother?
Hey, good. Welcome. Thanks for calling in.
Well, I want to talk about something that we read earlier that my sister brought to my attention earlier this week about when God met Moses and wanted to kill him. And it's very vague, and Moses doesn't take care of it. Zipporah does. So, I understand she had to have known about the ritual, but have you ever came across any extra biblical books that maybe go in deeper than that, or it's just the understanding how the law works, But
yeah, I'm going to put it on screen for you right now. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
This is in Jubilees chapter 48, and it's the same passage you're talking about here. In the 6th year of the 3rd week of the 49th Jubilee, you did depart and dwell in the land of Midian 5 weeks and 1 year. And when you returned into Egypt in the 2nd week in the 2nd year of the 50th Jubilee, and you yourself know what he spoke to you at Mount Sinai, and what Prince Mastema desired to do to you, to do with you when you were returning into Egypt, on the way when you did meet him at the lodging place. Did he not with all his power seek to slay you and deliver the Egyptians out of your hand when he saw that you were sent to execute judgment and vengeance on the Egyptians? But I delivered you out of Mastema's hand, and you did perform the signs and wonders which he was sent before him in the Egypt against Pharaoh and against all his house and against his servant and his people. So this passage right here, it's the accuser is Mastema, is the Satan, is the word for Satan in the book of Jubilees. And so we know what the accuser does, right? He accuses people. So what he's doing is Moses had not kept the terms of the covenant. We were just been talking about Torah this whole time. Moses was not perfect either. Okay, so he didn't circumcise his son properly on the 8th day, which was a requirement all the way back to the days of Abraham. I mean, it's been a long-standing requirement for the Israelites. He didn't do it, but he's about to go as the deliverer into enemy territory to tell his people of the covenant to come keep the covenant.
Right. And he's also supposed to represent, as, Yah, and he's uncircumcised. So,
well, not Pharaoh or not Moses, but his son was
uncircumcised. His son. He's not a good example as far as your house.
You can't be hypocritical. So the father basically is tying up a loose end here, but Satan knows about this loose end too, and he comes to accuse Moses, this is what, the accuser of the brethren does, right? He stands accusing us before the Father night and day. So he goes to accuse. This is why it says, what Mastema sought to do to you when you were returning to Egypt. Because remember, the passage in Exodus says that the Lord sought to slay Moses until Zipporah took that flint knife real quick and circumcised Gershom. Well, Moses was Gershom's not responsible. It was Moses' fault. That's why the Lord was sought to slay Moses for breaking the covenant.
Right.
But specifically because this is him about to go in and tell people to keep the covenant. And here he is not having kept the covenant, which was within his power to keep. So this is why the accuser of the brethren, as you put the two stories together, you see that, the accuser is accusing Moses before God. Hey, he hasn't done this part. He deserves death, because that's literally, if you don't do the circumcision of your son, you're blotted out of the land and you're out of covenant, right? This was the idea.
Right.
So obviously Moses went for 80 years of his life, and the Father showed him mercy on this, right? Or not 80 years, but I should say however long Gershom was alive. So let's just say, around 30 to 40 years, however old Gershom was.
Right.
That whole period of time was the Father showing mercy to Moses for not having done this already. So just for all the viewers out there that may be thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't circumcised my son, is the Father going to? No, guys, no. Like I've been trying to say this whole time, like he's been showing mercy this whole time. He wants you to do the behavior. He tells you, like, remember, there's the first death and there's the second death. So like there's some of these penalties, you may not see them in your lifetime, but you'll definitely face judgment for them, which may result in the second death. So this is why it's a big deal. You don't want to be blotted out of the land. You want to participate in the resurrection to be taken into the land eternally. So in this moment, Mastema, Satan character, he accuses Moses before the Father. So therefore, legally, the Father's required to act, right? So therefore,
we see that later on when we write, get written. But I was more curious as far as the part of Zipporah knew exactly what to do, why God was there to handle his business, and she took care of the business, not even Moses himself, and that's why it kind of
makes you think
fascinates me,
It makes you think that they've talked about this for some time.
Yeah, that's because that has to be the case, because it wasn't because of Moses not knowing what he should have done, because Zipporah and that growing up as the daughter of the priest of the Midianites, they don't do circumcision. So how would she even know that God's mad at this reason? It's not her. So it has to have been discussed. So
I agree with you. Now keep in mind, we're going to actually review this on Honor of Kings on buddy Ken Heidebrecht's channel, Hanging on His Words. Next week, we're going to be going over the book of Job and the comparisons between the Masoretic and the Septuagint in the book of Job. So we actually are going to learn that the Midianites are an extension in the same territory and area from where we see Balaam in Numbers 24, also in connection with the Edomites. And this is actually where Job ruled and reigned as king as well. And he was righteous who kept the Torah. So there were people that knew about the Torah. Now, specifically circumcision, though, we see Abraham being told to circumcise himself and his whole household and to perpetuate that down to his descendants. But everyone else that kept Torah around Abraham, they were not exactly told that. So that's kind of interesting, right? It's as it was a sign of the covenant passed down through the descendants of Abraham. But yet other people around, like scattered people within the Midianites who were loyal to Yahweh, they specifically were not given that command. So this is why, even though Jethro is the high priest of Midian, he comes in Exodus 18 and actually does sacrifice with Moses and Aaron, and he's accepted. But
I never thought about that.
See what I'm saying?
Interaction. Yeah.
He knew Torah too. A lot of people. This is why we kind of have a telescopic focus specifically on the descendants of Abraham within the passages of Scripture, but the circumstances around them, the people around them, there were people
that makes a little more sense, bro. When he gave him the advice of picking out men to do your judging for you, not just yourself, and that's right. It wasn't just off the wall thinking.
That's a Torah principle you would see with the priesthood, is that they would have delegates of a high priest and then lesser priests but all of them would be required to teach the instructions of God to the people. So this is why in the book of Jubilees in chapter 14, you see the same idea of Genesis going to the Melchizedek. And in Jubilees, it tells you the Melchizedek had multiple priests there. So it wasn't just one guy. It's a priesthood.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a group of men learning the Torah to teach other men the Torah.
Right. That's why it's hard for people to take that road, because he has a beginning, and we can go back and see, well, he has this is when he was born, this is when he died, but it's not one man. It's just like the president of the United States is not one man. It's an office, or the office of the priesthood. Yeah. So it's hard for them to just take that, like, you're so close, just
it requires actually learning what a priesthood is according to Scripture. And then also, we get this wonderful comparison in Hebrews 7 that compares the Levites. They chose their priesthood from amongst their specific genealogy versus this Melchizedek priesthood, which did not, which was just choosing men who were righteous, men who had an affinity or an inclination to do what was right. You would be to be trained in the ways of Yahweh, to be learn the law of God. This is literally, in my opinion, why Abraham, who was of that priesthood, is paying tithes to that high priest of that priesthood, because he was being, like, you have to read the rest of Jubilees. He was trained in writings as well, in the priesthood as well. So this is why he passes it down to Isaac and down to Jacob and then down to Levi. This is the story of Genesis 5 and the genealogy therein. I've tried to tell people for years, Genesis 5's genealogy is following a priesthood from Adam to Noah. This is a big deal for the Father. It's his righteous men who know his behavior and are passing it on to other people. That's why specifically those men are being pointed out in the genealogy of Genesis 5. Yeah.
I never put that connection there, but that's a good. But I agree with your understanding the priesthood and what that really entails. Really opens up your mind to understand that we've been taught so many misconceptions.
We have.
It's hard to know.
I call it mainstream church misunderstanding.
Well, bro, I grew up in the church since I was 8 years old, in the pews. Assemblies of God. Small little Pentecostal church. Different churches. Until the last 3 years, I've been. Well, it's 4 years now. It'll be 4 years. Couple of months I'll be 4 years old, following the instructions. Where when I first heard about the instructions being valid, I quickly in my mind went through the files of the word, and it clicked where, like, that makes more sense, just knowing what the Bible says than its explanation. It doesn't quite. It's like when you study the cosmology. When you study, hey, this doesn't quite add up here, but
that's right.
Yeah.
This is why Kingdom in Context, the channel you're watching this on, this is why we have our logo as a tree with multiple ideas, multiple themes from Scripture on the branches of the tree, and that one of those themes is the priesthoods, because it's super important for people to understand what a priesthood is, how it's all throughout the Scriptures. Your Messiah is a high priest and a priesthood over you, making atonement for you on your behalf to the Father. Like, it's a huge point of understanding that people are missing, because they're never taught this stuff. Even in Bible colleges, they're never taught this stuff. So I just think it helps people clear up a lot of Old Testament scriptures if they understand what a priesthood is and how it works.
Yeah, so much. And even myself going to Bible college, where you don't really teach you the Bible, they teach you how to be a good representative of, whatever you signed up for, a copy. But thanks, bro. I just wanted to talk about that,
Sure.
Coincidence that we read over, that part about God and Moses, but thank you, bro, for all your input and your knowledge there. I really appreciate it, bro. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Just keep in mind with this Exodus story here in chapter 4 with the circumcision concept and Zipporah and Gershom and Moses, that mix that with Jubilees 48. You've got we see something similar to this in the Scriptures, both with Job chapter 1 and 2, where Satan comes before the father to accuse Job, right, and to try to get him to harm Job. And then we also see this also in the days of David in First Chronicles. You have to look at the Septuagint though, but when you look in the story of David and in Chronicles, where he it says in the Septuagint that Satan incited David to take a census of his military. It doesn't say that in the Masoretic. So therefore you're thinking, like, why would David do this? And why is God punishing him so bad?
Yeah, it's just like right out of left field right there. Just all of a sudden.
This is some of the minute differences in the two texts, but that gives you more understanding of why it was a great transgression. And it's literally Satan's trying to set David up, and so he can be accused and receive just penalty from the Father, which is exactly what happens. Unfortunately, David falls for it, whereas Job and Moses, Zipporah saves Moses here in this moment, but Job doesn't fall for it. He just comes out better because of it, because he's faithful over time. So, but the point is that there is the enemy at work. The accuser of their brethren is at work in these stories, and this is why if the father is following a law and he has to be just and fair to that law because that's his behavior, then that means he has to treat the people of the covenant the same way he would anyone else, right? So that's where the Satan tries to twist that law to attack us with it. So that's why it's our job to be faithful to the law and to know it, to walk it out with fear and trembling, so that we can have that shield of faith that bounces off those fiery darts of the enemy.
Well, it was kind of amazing, bro. I was thinking about this morning because I was hearing a study about Job yesterday, and different perspective about it, but lost my train of thought, brother.
That's okay, brother. Yeah, it's all right. I really appreciate you calling in.
But thank you. Yeah, shalom, bro. Enjoy the rest of the Sabbath.
Yeah, you too. Enjoy your rest. Call in again. We'll see you next time.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you later. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us this week. Like I said, the little short story that we played at the beginning of the episode, I'm actually going to upload that as a separate video on the channel, so you guys can go check it out, and the audio should be fine with the second one. But so yeah, just if you guys, it does real quick. One last question. Rian Melton is asking, I think I'm saying your name right, Rian or Rain. Mine's Sean, but with an S, so it's like I don't know. Help me out in the chat. You're asking, why did Moses circumcise his son when he needed to on the 8th day? That's what we were just talking about. It doesn't directly tell us, but he does have to deal with this of not doing this. He has to deal with this before he goes back to Egypt, because he can't go back there hypocritically. So, all right, guys, I appreciate you being here, and we hope to see you here, Torah portions next week.